Hello. In this video I will share about life cycle assessment for topic 5, namely life cycle interpretation, reporting, and critical review. This video will cover 3 subtopics in topic 5, 5.0, summary. What is interpretation? 5.1, development and rank of interpretation phase, and lastly 5.2, the interpretation phase according to ISO. The interpretation is the final phase of an LCA. Interpretation is a systematic technique to identify, quantify, check, and evaluate information from the results. The results are summarized during the interpretation phase. Interpretation is summarized for all topics involving LCA, such as goal and scope, life cycle inventory, and impact assessment. With the interpretation in an LCA, all results and data can be analyzed and evaluated. Now, let's talk about subtopic 5.1 in interpretation, which is development and rank of the interpretation phase. The first workshop of LCA conducted by Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, SETAC, was held in August 1990. This workshop proposed a mandatory impact assessment and the investigation of possible improvement on the basis of a product-related environmental analysis, or now called as life cycle assessment. Another SETAC workshop was held in Florida in 1992. At this time, the third component of the SETAC triangle was improvement analysis, and it became the fourth component when the first phase of an LCA was introduced, which is definition, goal, and scope. In 1993, the third SETAC workshop was held in Portugal. The ISO standardization process of LCA was initiated, and improvement analysis was discarded and replaced with new phase. Interpretation was developed and introduced as International Standard ISO 14043. Now, let's move to subtopic 5.2, the interpretation phase according to ISO. The first ISO in interpretation, ISO 14040. ISO 14040 is the interpretation phase of LCA in findings from the inventory analysis and the impact assessment. The interpretation phase should deliver results that are consistent with the defined goal and scope and which reach conclusions, explain limitations, and recommendations. Second ISO in interpretation, ISO 14044. The steps of interpretation in ISO 14044 are composed of identifications of the significant issues based on the results of the LCI and LCIA phases of LCA. Included with an evaluation of the study, considering completeness, sensitivity, and consistency checks as well as conclusions, limitations, and recommendations. Do you know what is interrelations of constituents in the interpretation and other phases of an LCA? Phase 1, goal and scope definition. Phase 2, inventory analysis. Phase 3, impact assessment. Phase 4, interpretation. Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 will go to Phase 4 to identify the significant issues, and to evaluate of completeness check, sensitivity check, consistency check, and other checks. All the results and data will be composed of conclusions, limitations, and recommendations at the end of the steps. These steps will return back to Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. The identifications of significant issues is aimed at identifying results parameters for which a significant quantitative difference, involving data uncertainties. Why? This is to ensure careful identifications and preventing over and misinterpretations. ISO 14044 provides examples of significant issues, such as inventory data, impact categories, Contributions of life cycle sections, for example single or groups unit processes, such as transports or energy production. The deduction of significance according to the same standard is carried out following 4 types of information, such as the results of the finished phases of life cycle inventory and LCIA. Second, elements of methodological approach, for example allocation rules and system boundary in the inventory, impact assessment, and models. Third, value choices applied in the study on the basis of the goal of the study and applied in the optional steps of grouping and normalizations in the impact assessment phase. Last type, role and responsibility of interested parties and resets of the critical review. Evaluation. Evaluation according to the standards aims to enforce trust into the reliability of results of an LCA and into significant parameters. A further intent is to provide a clear and comprehensible overview of the results of the study. The use of the following 3 techniques shall be considered in evaluation. First, completeness check. Second, sensitivity check. Third, consistency check. The completeness check relates to all relevant information, especially to the provision of significant parameters. In case of gaps, the inventory or the impact assessment should be repeated with optimized data in the sense of an iterative approach. In most cases, expectations need to be lowered in order to provide consistency. The sensitivity check is probably the most frequently applied quantitative technique for evaluation. According to ISO 14044, it is mandatory if a choice between several allocation rules is possible. The goal of the sensitivity check is to estimate the uncertainties in the results of an LCA due to data quality and cutoff criteria. Last technique should be considered in evaluation is consistency check. Consistency check provides reference to the first phase of LCA, which goal and scope definition. According to ISO 14044, the objective of the consistency check is to determine when the assumptions, methods, and data are consistent with the goal and scope. Now, I have a simple question to test the strength of your memory after watching this video. The question is improvement analysis an old name for interpretation? Yes or no? You have 10 seconds to think. The answer is yes. Congratulations if your answer is correct. That is the end of our video. Thank you for time to watching this video, and see you again. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel.